Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/malicious compliance, where people follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, it's all about people getting back at their horrible bosses, guys. And OP tells a story about the time his wife gets a Karen boss and the whole crew fired. And the story is super satisfying. I hope you enjoy the stories, don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So about a decade ago, I was the new guy at the company. We have people fly in from all over the world for job sites, and one of the things that I did in my earlier days was pick those people up from the airport to take them to their hotel after work, etc. On this day, I pick up a guy who's going to be my boss on an upcoming job. The airport's about an hour away from our headquarters and hotel if you take the highway and the main roads. When I meet him at the airport, he makes a request that I follow the directions on this awesome new GPS app that he's got on his phone. The guy swears it finds the absolute fastest routes. Now I'm paid by the hour and I'm the new guy, so I say, sure, no problem. Well, the GPS ends up taking almost 25% longer than the main roads would have, but I'm not bothered. The next day, I'm asked again to take him to his hotel. Now, the hotel's a straight shot a few miles down the road, but the roads always stop and go at rush hour. So I make a turn off the road almost immediately to take a route that I know is faster, that bypasses all this traffic, and my boss starts giving me grief about not listening to his magical GPS app. The guy literally said that I'm trying to waste his time. I get him to the hotel in great time, but he still won't stop insisting that the main road, which we could see was still backed up, would have been faster, and next time to just listen to his GPS. And I'm thinking, okay, fine. A couple of days later, we drive a few hours to our primary job site. The trip is fine. I follow his magical app and we arrive without incident. It's the largest job I've done so far, and I stumble with a bit of it. My boss then tries to give me a stern pep talk at the end of day number 1, but it fails miserably. One of the critiques he gave me is, quote, "You are not here to think, you basically do what you're told." And here's the thing, there's engineers on the job and there's techs. I'm just a tech, and I'm basically told that I'm there to do the grunt work and to listen to what people like him tell me to do. It was a pretty demoralizing lecture, honestly, but I take it to heart. Once the event's over, it's my job to take Boss Man back to the airport, which I'd like to remind you at this point is in the city I live in, not where he's from. We're running a little later than I'd prefer to, but he's the kind of guy who would rather get to the airport 15 minutes before his flight boards. And as always, we're using his GPS, which the guy's still raving about. Now, I don't know if this dude's friend invented the app or something, but he's seriously fawning over it. Well, we approach what I know is the exit to the airport, but the app says to stay on the highway and to take the next exit in a mile or two. So I follow the app, having learned a lesson from my boss. And soon, we're stopped dead in a tight, single-lane construction zone. This is when my boss realizes and he starts to panic. He then starts asking if I'm sure I took the right route. This is when I respond, well, the exit I'd normally take for the airport was a little ways back, but your GPS said to keep going. This is when Boss Man says, "You went past the exit for the airport?" I tell him I went past an exit for the airport. I'm sure this one will get us there, but with the speed the traffic is moving, I don't know if you're gonna make your flight. It's already a pretty tight connection. It's at this point, he shouts at me saying, "What were you thinking?" And since the car was stopped dead, I turned my head around so I could meet his eyes, and I very blankly said, "I'm not here to think, remember? You told me to just follow orders." We were stuck in traffic for a long while, and honestly, I think it would have been quicker if he got out and walked to the airport. I spent the rest of the trip listening to him yell at some poor airline agent about getting his flight rebooked, since at this point, he wasn't going to get there in time. And the thing is, this really wasn't even malicious on my end. As the new guy, I was just too timid to rock the boat anymore, so I was doing exactly as I was told. It's not my fault, it came back to bite him in the end. You know what, guys, that smug boss totally got what he deserved, especially after what he said to OP during that stupid little pep talk. You are not here to think, you're here to do what I tell you. I just love how OP threw the "I'm not here to think" line right back at him when Bossman tried to blame him for missing the flight. The stupid is strong with some people, I swear. Okay, so this took place back in the mid-90s. My wife and I were newly married and our daughter was still an infant. My wife worked in healthcare as a home care nurse, traveling from house to house looking after people. However, soon after my daughter was born, she didn't want a job that put her on the road so much, so she applied to be a cleaner at the military base near the community. Now, two things about our situation that are noteworthy. One is that my wife is a visible minority, and second, as a healthcare worker, she logs everything as a force of habit. The company that hired her was a national company. The base office usually had 5 employees. One had recently quit because her husband was moving with his military job to another part of the country, so the boss hires my wife to replace her. The 4 other workers were tight. Louise was the big boss, who hired her best friend Donna, Donna's brother Dan, and Louise's niece Tracy. My wife was a true outsider. When my wife started working, she immediately saw things that were not quite on the level. Even though my wife was paid from 4 p.m. to midnight, she was home by 8 p.m. every night. She was also excluded from cleaning the buildings that housed the engineering and tenancy offices. Occasionally, when she would clean those offices, she saw her colleagues rifling through desks and filing cabinets, photocopying documents and other shady stuff. My wife also saw Louise threaten a soldier with extra duties for not opening doors fast enough. And here's a note, Louise's husband was a senior NCO in the unit, but jobs were hard to find at the time, so my wife was willing to accept a little discomfort to her ethics. However, after a few months, the racial stuff started. It started with a nickname, and then morphed into calling her slurs and then serious rumors about her. After they got more comfortable, they started telling racial jokes without even trying to hide it. When my wife complained to the 4 of them that she was uncomfortable, she got called weak, and Louise actually threatened her employment. My wife told Louise that she would go to the head office, and she was then basically told by her boss Louise to go ahead, that nothing will come from that. So with that being said, she called the head office from work, and there she encounters Stuart. Stuart from HR dressed down my wife over women's talk, and said that she needs to thicken her skin and not be too sensitive. My wife countered that she would go to the authorities, and that's when Stuart says, "No laws have been broken, so go ahead, go to the authorities, good luck." Later that shift, my wife was fired for attitude. So here's where the malicious compliance comes into play. My wife went to the authorities, just not the police. She went to the Human Rights Commission and to the military base headquarters. There, she gave both photocopies of her logs. The human rights investigation determined that there was a work environment that tolerated racist behaviors. That garnered an apology and acknowledgement from Stuart, with a smug comment that they will henceforth include a clause about racial sensitivity in their employee paperwork. He even made a comment to my wife that essentially this was nothing. However, behind the scenes, the base had been doing their own investigation, and this is what they found. Number 1. Some of the people whose desks had been rifled through in the tenancy buildings had reported that they suspected they had been snooped through. The dates of the reports matched my wife's logs on the date she was there. Number 2. Louise threatening a soldier was followed up, and it was discovered that Louise's husband had chastised the soldier and arranged for him to do 2 weeks extra duties, a violation of an abuse of authority statute. Number 3. The contract with the base required 40 hours of service per day. The base pulled the security and key logs, showing that the work was always done by 8 p.m. The base was paying for 40 hours per day and getting 20 hours service. Number 4. There was a clause in the cleaning contract that stated that federal government human rights regulations needed to be followed. The results of the commission's investigation determined that they were in violation. And number 5. Other bases were contacted to see what was going on with this company. They found out that others were having similar issues. So as a result, the base broke the contract with cause. It was a 5-year contract, broken after the 2nd year. And here's the best part. Louise, Donna, Dan, and Tracy were suddenly out of work. The next cleaning company came in. All personnel had to undergo vetting for security. All cleaning was also done in the day to prevent people rifling the desks. 40 hours was 40 hours, and the cleaners were not authorized to engage soldiers beyond the casual "how are you" conversation. My wife went back to healthcare. However, every once in a while, she wonders what Stuart thinks of women's talk now. That was so freaking satisfying, right? I just love the fact that Smug Louise and her friends group was all terminated for that. Maybe next time she'll think twice about daring somebody to go do something about her nasty behavior. With that said, OP does come back with an edit to add a few things. OP writes, "I'm Canadian," and the desk snooping was the base housing offices. The 4 cleaners all lived in base housing, so they were looking up gossip-worthy material on their neighbors and friends. They were also looking to see what major contracts were coming for house repairs, like window replacement, etc. This was not classified material. And while the 4 of them lost employment, they were not held accountable. The company that had the contract just laid them off, so they were able to find work again shortly. However, not as cleaners. The cleaners had a reliability screening to work on base even prior to this. However, it's as simple as a criminal record check and not much more. After this, the cleaners never worked in an area without supervision and always during the same workday as people in the offices. As for the NCO who chastised the soldier, he was called to answer for that. He ended up getting moved a year later with a bit of a shadow following him. However, it didn't last long and there was no permanent career mark left. Finally, when this happened, we were very young. My wife and I were not the type to rock the boat. I was brand new in the military, and I did not want to be labeled as a problem soldier, so we remained quiet for way too long. After this, we both grew our confidence and we were able to move on. We don't stay quiet too long when something's not right. So my great-uncle passed away at 97, and I heard this great story of malicious compliance at his memorial service today. He worked for over 50 years at the same confectionery factory, and most of that time, he was a boiler room attendant. This was just after World War II, and at the time, most of the machines and processes were powered by steam, even the heating. The steam was generated by massive boilers, and it was his job to monitor the boilers to make sure nothing went wrong. These boilers could potentially explode, causing great damage. By law, the boiler had to be attended at all times, and there were shifts that watched them around the clock, even when the factory was closed. They took so long to heat up that it was easier and cheaper to leave them running at night. After about 10 years of no incidents, the company hired a lead hand, who would also act as the safety officer. The guy had been a sergeant in the army, and he took his job quite seriously, being quite the disciplinarian. He instituted a multitude of new procedures, some warranted and some just to establish control. The first time he wanted to conduct a fire drill, he went around telling the staff that when they heard the fire alarm, they had to exit the building in an orderly fashion. He got to the boiler room, and that's when he saw my great-uncle on duty that day. My uncle informed him that he would not be able to evacuate with everyone else, as he had to stay with the boiler. The safety officer didn't give him time to explain why. He just bluntly informed him that he was to treat the fire drill as if it was a real fire, no exceptions. When the fire bell finally rang, my uncle did exactly what he was told to do. He turned off the gas to the boilers, vented all the built-up steam, purged the water, and joined everyone outside. At the evacuation point, they were doing a head count when the production manager spots my uncle and immediately approaches him and asked what he was doing away from the boiler. That's when my uncle told him that he was participating in the fire drill as instructed, but not to worry as he had shut down the boiler completely. And hearing that, the color immediately drains from the manager's face. He was then asked how long it would take to bring the boilers back online. Apparently, it would take hours alone just to fill the boilers with water and heat them up. And here's the big issue. The big issue was since they had done an emergency purge, they were required to inspect every pipe, joint, and connection for damage before restarting to make sure it was safe to start to reheat. The other boiler men were called in and they got paid double time to work through the night to get the boiler ready for the next day. The production staff all got sent home, but they still got paid for the day, as it wasn't their fault the factory couldn't run. It cost them a day's production as well. The safety officer did keep his job, but for the next 40 years, the boiler staff were all exempt from fire drills. What a golden malicious compliance, guys, and honestly, I'm surprised that safety officer had no idea that OP's uncle had to be there, but I guess he was too busy going on a power trip, right? But yeah, treat all drills as real needs to have practical exemptions. And I only wish I could see the safety officer's face when he realized he messed up so badly, to the point it costed the company who knows how much money. So to start, I drive charter tour coaches for a living. Our industry is very heavily regulated, as it should be, as we carry the most valuable of cargo, your family, kids, and relatives. If I fall asleep and hit a car, well, you can work it out. Now, one of the rules is after a working day, a minimum time of complete rest must be given undisturbed by law. This time can be reduced, but only 3 times a work period. Another interesting rule is by law, if your rest is disturbed, your rest must restart as though you've had no rest. This will be important later. Now, it does sound confusing, but I'll break it down. Basically, I can have a minimum of 9 hours rest 3 times a week, and the rest must be 11 hours minimum. Anything less than 11 complete hours rest period, and it's treated like I had 9 hours only, even if it's 10 hours and 59 minutes. Now, because of this, most tour companies keep rest periods to 11 hours minimum, looking on the reduced rest as a just in case we get held up, get finished late, etc. So we can start on time the next day and stick to the itinerary. Now, we worked with one tour company, who I'll call Mega Cheap Tours, and their tour leaders like to squeeze every last bit of driving out of their tour hires. I'm talking excursions all day to some out-of-the-way flea pit, it doesn't matter, as long as the tour leader gets a kickback. With that said, most good companies eat close or in their hotel to allow the driver to rest, but for these guys, the cheapest was the best. And if it meant an hour there and an hour back at night, so be it. Screw the driver. The reason for this is the tour leaders often got a kickback if they brought business to certain places. I had spoken to my traffic manager how these guys had just ignored the itinerary, and I was told, just do what they say, they're a customer. I was working with one tour leader who we'll call Juan. He was well known for not only working you to death, but also stiffing you on your tips. It's also the last day of the tour, and it's been a long day, but tomorrow I get rid of all of them at the airport, and good riddance, I thought. Well, as the passengers are at an excursion, Juan comes to the coach. He says, we need to go here for dinner tonight. He then passes me the address, and I look at the GPS and I tell him, Juan, that's an hour and 15 minutes away from our hotel tonight. You guys will be eating for 2 hours, and then that's an hour and 15 minutes back. I then need to shut down the coach and park it. I won't be finished until 11 p.m. At that, he looks at me and says, I know the rules. You only need 9 hours rest. We'll leave at 8 a.m., plenty of time for a 2 p.m. flight. Well, he was right, of course, but remember that 3 times a week thing? The guy already had me on a short rest time 3 times this trip, all to go to dinner places that gave him a kickback. It was at this point malicious compliance kicks in. I tell him, you're right, I can work after 9 hours. I then changed the subject quickly as he smiled, thinking he screwed me over. Well, the dinner transfer was worse than I thought. It was heavy traffic getting there, and that meant I was late, which meant they started eating late, which of course meant they came back late. By the time I parked at the hotel, it was close to midnight. And I knew what was coming in the morning, so I phoned my 24-hour traffic department, and as expected, I was told under no circumstances was I to break the law and run without my legal rest. There would be massive fines for the company and for me if I did. Normally, I set 2 alarms when I'm on reduced rest, as to be honest, it does take a toll, and I need them to get up, but tonight I set absolutely nothing, and I even took my hotel phone off the hook. I went to bed, and I woke up to thumping on my hotel door, and there was the hotel manager and a very irate Juan. He screams at me and says, you stupid driver, it's 8 a.m., everyone's outside, they're checked out with luggage, and you've slept in. Get your ass dressed and get to the coach. This is when I smile and say, Juan, I'm on my legal break. We got back nearly at midnight, so I can't start until nearly 9. But besides, I've worked 3 times after reduced rest this trip, and I can't go anywhere until 11 hours of undisturbed rest. Also, you've just disturbed my rest, as this gentleman can confirm. And by law, my rest period resets and starts again. But you know this, as you know the rules, right? So I'll see you at 7 p.m. tonight. The manager, knowing what I'd just done, tries to hold back a laugh, and Juan's eyes nearly bulged out of his head, which was funny. He then says, "Wait, what do you mean? We need to get to a 2 p.m. flight." This is when I respond, "I know. So it's best to start organizing taxis for the 40-odd people out there. And next trip, don't take advantage of your driver for your benefit." I said that as I shut the door on them both. Now I knew what was about to happen. Within 5 minutes, my phone rang. It was the traffic manager, asking what time I finished the night before. They then said, "You can start at 9. Until I pointed out the 3 late finishes, and that's when complete silence on the phone. The traffic manager then says, "Well, you're right, but don't expect to be doing any more of this company's tours. They request we never send you." I then asked if he wanted me to drive without legal rest. I knew he wouldn't dare say yes, as I could be recording it. He then tells me, no, you must take legal rest. This is the tour leader's problem. If he had stuck to the itinerary's hours, everything would be just fine. Do me a favor and start at 11 a.m., not 7 p.m. We need the coach back tonight. I knew when to not push it any further, and I said I would be happy to start at 11 a.m., and I would start getting ready now and go down for breakfast. An hour later, I went downstairs, and I saw Juan surrounded by angry passengers, screaming at him with a phone to his ear. He then saw me and came over and said, "Driver, please. Neither I nor my company can get a coach to hire, and it's 40 miles to the airport, and our flight leaves in 4 hours. My company is mad that I've not left you legal rest, and they're blaming me, so please help me." At this point, I couldn't resist. I told him, "Juan, if you use all those gratuities that you've stolen from me and everyone else over the years, you'll be able to afford to hire 10 taxis no problem, and you'll make this flight. But I would be quick about it, otherwise you might get stuck with 40-odd replacement flights as well as taxis." Hearing me say that, Juan gulped. His eyes bulged out of his head, and he went white all in one. It was actually funny to watch. The guy ran to reception asking for 10 taxis. What was funnier was when the taxis showed up, they said they needed another 4 or 5 just for the luggage, as each person had 2 massive suitcases. I just sat watching the show through the window, eating my breakfast and drinking my coffee. The staff thought I was a hero, and they all smirked and looked on from their respective posts. I knew that after this, no tips from the passengers would change hands, and the cost of those taxis would hit his current bankroll so hard. Or at least I hoped. My boss was right too. I never have, nor ever will, do this company's tours again. It was quickly passed back that I wasn't wanted. But Juan has never been back leading this company's tours either. My ex-colleagues told me that the tour leaders now are told by their head office to never give the drivers less than 11 hours off every night. And they need to factor this into any dinner transfers. And if it can't be accommodated, then no dinner transfer. And there's no off-itinerary excursions, period. You know, I always love it when a malicious compliance helps to benefit others down the road. And OP was in fact a hero, guys, for putting their foot down when it came to this. Like, that is such a win-win situation for both the driver and the people on board. But yeah, like, how sleazy are some tour guides, right? On purpose, making drivers go longer distances, all to get kickbacks from their little buddies' restaurants and stuff. And this person comments, "As a hotel front desk manager, I applaud you for what you did. I have a special hatred for tour guides, and you did us all justice. Thank you so much, you capeless hero." And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode, where a smug, entitled dad steals from his own daughter and actually gets mad when cops are called. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.